The first principle. At its heart, the Mental Capacity Act 2005 aims to maximise the ability of people to make their own decisions and to participate in decision-making as far as they are able. It also aims to protect people who lack the capacity to make particular decisions. The 5 principles underpin the empowering ethos of the Act. Getting the principles right means practising in a way that complies with the ethos of the Act, so try to test your decisions and actions against these principles. In this podcast, we'll begin by exploring the first principle, the presumption of capacity in adults. The first principle says, a person must be assumed to have capacity unless it is established that he lacks capacity. This establishes the principle that every adult over the age of 16 years has a right to make his own decisions and that his capacity to do this must be assumed until proven otherwise. There is a danger, and you may even have experienced this, that some people make assumptions based upon a person's impairment. So, the fact that someone has dementia might lead others to assume the person lacks the capacity to make particular decisions. Nothing could be further from the truth. Sometimes the opposite can happen. The assumption of capacity may, incorrectly, be used to support a decision not to intervene, leaving some adults at risk of harm. The assumption of capacity is an empowering principle which serves an important purpose. Why? Well, the only way to displace the assumption is by assessing the person as lacking capacity to make the particular decision at the time it needs to be made, using the 2-stage test. In a way, this approach is protective of you and your client. Protective of you because even when you doubt a person's capacity to make the particular decision, the steps you have to take to assess capacity will automatically support your reasonable belief, as long as you record these steps. More on reasonable belief in another podcast. It protects your client because, in the absence of a capacity assessment, doubts must be resolved in favour of the person having capacity to make the particular decision. So, even if you doubt that a person has capacity to make the decision in question, you must start by assuming that he does. The burden of proving that a person lacks capacity rests upon you, the person who carries out the capacity assessment. It is not for your client to prove that he has capacity. It is important to feel clear about a person's capacity. This is because a person with mental capacity has a right to make his own decisions, including the right to give consent or to refuse consent to any act in connection with his care or treatment. Valid consent means there is lawful authority for you to act, safe in the knowledge that the person has permitted this. And if the person refuses to consent to something, his decision must be respected. To avoid difficulties with the first principle, try to follow these steps. First, remember that every adult who is 16 years of age or more is to be assumed to have capacity to make his own decision about a matter that affects him, unless there is evidence that he does not. Second, if you have doubts about a person's capacity, this principle must be your starting point. Its main function is to lead you to decide whether he has capacity using the 2-stage test. If you assess his capacity using the test and you decide that he lacks capacity to make that decision in question, you've displaced the assumption. Finally, the principle is not intended to support a decision not to intervene, particularly where the person puts himself at risk of harm. Recognizing that someone shall be assumed to have capacity does not mean that you should not investigate and support him. Check out our next podcast on the 5 principles, in which we'll explore the second principle, supporting decision-making.